The late June sun blazed over Austin, Texas, casting a shimmering heat across Mason Reed's modest ranch-style home in the Hyde Park neighborhood, where the scent of mesquite smoke from the backyard grill mingled with the laughter of kids playing on a slip-and-slide. Mason, a 38-year-old HVAC technician with chestnut brown hair and hazel eyes that crinkled when he smiled, adjusted the coals on the grill, his faded plaid shirt rolled up to his elbows, a bead of sweat trickling down his temple as he flipped burgers for the annual summer barbecue he'd been planning for weeks. His twin daughters, Ava and Lily, both 6, squealed in delight as they splashed in the kiddie pool, their colorful swimsuits a stark contrast to the green lawn, while neighbors chatted over iced tea on the patio, the kind of small-town vibe Austin still clung to despite its growth. Mason's wife, Lydia Harper, stood out like a sore thumb in the casual setting, her blonde hair cascading in perfect waves down her back, her emerald eyes glued to her phone as she leaned against the kitchen counter inside, wearing a sleek black dress that hugged her curves, more suited for a downtown cocktail bar than a family barbecue. Mason had noticed the change in her over the past year, the late nights at book club, the new wardrobe, the way she'd pull away when he tried to hold her. But he chalked it up to stress, to her new job as a real estate agent, anything but the truth. Lydia, you sure you don't want to change into something more barbecue-friendly? Mason called through the open window, his tone light but his hazel eyes searching her face for a reaction, hoping for the woman he'd married 10 years ago to reappear, the one who'd dance barefoot on this very lawn with him under the stars. Lydia barely looked up from her phone, her manicured nails tapping the screen as she replied, her voice sharp enough to cut through the summer air. Don't start, Mason. I told you we're having a guest. A guest? Mason's brow furrowed, his hands pausing over the sizzling patties, the word echoing in his mind like a warning he couldn't quite place. But before he could press her, the doorbell rang, a sharp chime that seemed to slice through the festive chatter. Wiping his hands on a dish towel, Mason walked through the house, his boots thudding against the hardwood floor, and opened the door to a sight that made his stomach drop. A man, 6 feet 5 inches with a gym-sculpted frame that strained against a too-tight leather jacket. His dark hair slicked back, a tribal tattoo snaking up his neck, and a smirk that screamed trouble. Caleb Vaughn, the man introduced himself, his voice a low growl as he pushed past Mason without waiting for an invitation, his heavy cologne trailing behind him like a storm cloud, his designer sunglasses perched on his head even though the sun was starting to dip. Mason stood frozen for a moment, his hands still on the doorknob, his hazel eyes narrowing as he watched Caleb stride into his living room like he owned it, kicking off his boots and dropping onto the couch with a thud. His legs sprawled wide as he propped his feet on the coffee table, the same table where Ava and Lily had colored pictures for Father's Day just last week. Lydia emerged from the kitchen, her face lighting up in a way Mason hadn't seen in years, her emerald eyes sparkling as she crossed the room, her heels clicking against the floor, and said, "Everyone, this is Caleb. He's a friend from work." A friend? Mason's jaw tightened, his fingers curling into fists at his sides as he watched Caleb wink at Lydia. The kind of wink that carried a secret, a promise, something Mason wasn't meant to understand, and the kids, splashing in the backyard, turned to look, their innocent faces etched with confusion as they whispered to each other. "Who's that man, Daddy?" Mason forced a smile, his voice tight as he said, "Yeah, who is he, Lydia?" But her laugh, a high-pitched giggle he hadn't heard since their dating days, cut through his question like a knife, and as Caleb leaned back, his smirk growing wider, Mason felt the first crack in the foundation of the life he'd built, a crack that would soon shatter everything he held dear. The Austin evening was still swelteringly unbearable as the summer barbecue in Mason Reed's backyard stretched into dusk, the cicadas buzzing loudly while the string lights Mason had hung cast a warm golden glow over the patio, where neighbors sipped lemonade and the twins, Ava and Lily, giggled as they chased fireflies across the lawn, their tiny hands glowing with the captured light of the insects. Inside the ranch-style home in Hyde Park, the air was thick with tension, a stark contrast to the carefree chatter outside, as Mason, a 38-year-old HVAC technician with chestnut brown hair and hazel eyes now darkened with unease, stood in the kitchen, pouring iced tea into mason jars, his plaid shirt damp with sweat from the grill, his hands trembling slightly as he tried to shake off the growing dread in his gut. Lydia Harper, his wife of 10 years, had barely stepped outside to join the party, her blonde hair still perfectly styled, her emerald eyes glinting with something Mason couldn't place. Excitement, maybe, or defiance. As she leaned against the living room doorway, her sleek black dress clinging to her like a second skin, her laughter ringing out in a way that felt foreign, directed not at him but at Caleb Vaughn, the 6 feet 5 inches stranger who'd barged into their home like he owned it. His leather jacket, now slung over the couch, his tattooed neck glistening with sweat as he sprawled on the furniture. A beer in hand, his smirk as sharp as a blade. Caleb had been whispering to Lydia for the past 20 minutes, their heads bent close together, her giggles punctuated by playful shoves against his chest, each touch a dagger to Mason's heart, his knuckles whitening around the pitcher of tea as he watched, his hazel eyes darting between them, searching for a sign, any sign, that this wasn't what he feared it was. The twins ran inside, their bare feet slapping against the hardwood floor, their voices high with excitement as they shouted, "Daddy, look at the fireflies we caught!" But before Mason could respond, Caleb stood up, his towering frame casting a shadow across the room, his dark eyes locking onto Mason with a predatory gleam, and he said, his voice a low, deliberate growl that silenced the room, "You're out, man. I'm the new head of this house." The words hit Mason like a freight train, his breath catching in his throat, his hazel eyes widening in disbelief as he turned to Lydia, waiting for her to laugh, to correct Caleb, to do anything to show this was a sick joke. But Lydia just stood there, her arms crossed, her lips curling into a smug, unapologetic smirk that made Mason's blood run cold, her emerald eyes glinting with a cruel satisfaction, as if she'd been waiting for this moment. Before Mason could process her betrayal, Caleb took 2 long strides toward him, his boots thudding ominously against the floor, and without warning, he slapped Mason across the face, the sound a sharp crack that echoed through the house, the sting burning Mason's cheek as Ava and Lily froze, their firefly jars slipping from their hands, shattering on the floor, their tiny faces crumpling in fear and confusion as they whispered, "Daddy." The humiliation seared through Mason like wildfire, his vision blurring with rage, his chest heaving as he looked at his daughters, their innocence shattered in an instant, and then at Lydia, who did nothing, said nothing, her smirk widening as if she relished his pain. Something inside Mason snapped, a primal fury he'd never felt before, and with a roar, he lunged at Caleb, tackling him with the force of a man who had nothing left to lose, the two crashing into the living room, toppling a bookshelf that sent books and picture frames flying, the glass of a family photo from their Hawaii honeymoon splintering under their weight. Mason's fists flew with a ferocity he didn't know he possessed, each punch landing with a sickening crunch, Caleb's nose cracking under the impact, blood splattering across the hardwood as Caleb groaned, his arrogance replaced by pain, his wrist twisting unnaturally as Mason pinned it to the ground, the snap of bone echoing like a gunshot. Lydia screamed, "Stop it, Mason! You're insane! Leave Caleb alone!" Her voice shrill as she rushed forward, trying to pull Mason off, but he shoved her away, his hazel eyes blazing with a fury that made her stumble back, her heels skidding on the floor. Neighbors rushed in from the patio, drawn by the commotion, their gasps filling the air as paramedics arrived minutes later, sirens wailing through the quiet Austin night, their red and blue lights flashing through the windows as they dragged Caleb out on a stretcher, his face swollen and unrecognizable, his hand limp and bloodied, his groans fading into the distance. Police followed, their questions sharp and pointed, but the neighbors vouched for Mason, their voices a chorus of support as they recounted Caleb's provocation. The slap, the chaos, and Mason stood in the wreckage of his living room, his shirt torn, his knuckles raw and bleeding, his breathing ragged as he looked at Lydia, who glared at him with a venom he'd never seen before, her voice a hiss as she spat. "You've ruined everything, Mason. You're a monster." But as he looked at Ava and Lily, huddled together on the couch, their tear-streaked faces watching him with a mix of fear and trust, Mason knew he wasn't the monster here. He was a father who just protected his home, even if it meant breaking everything else in the process. The silence in Mason Reed's ranch-style home in Austin's Hyde Park neighborhood was suffocating as the chaos of the barbecue aftermath settled into an eerie stillness. the cicadas outside the only sound piercing the night, their relentless buzzing a cruel contrast to the devastation inside, where the living room lay in ruins. Shattered glass from the bookshelf glinting under the dim string lights, a family photo from a Hawaii honeymoon crumpled and torn on the hardwood floor, and the faint, metallic scent of Caleb's blood lingering in the air. Mason, a 38-year-old HVAC technician with chestnut brown hair matted with sweat and hazel eyes now hollow with shock, stood in the middle of the wreckage, his torn plaid shirt hanging off his shoulders, his knuckles bruised and bloodied from the fight, his breathing shallow as he tried to process the betrayal that had just unfolded in front of his twin daughters, Ava and Lily, who were now huddled in their bedroom upstairs, their soft sobs echoing down the hall, a sound that broke Mason's heart more than any punch ever could. Lydia Harper, his wife of 10 years, sat perched on the armrest of the couch, her blonde hair still immaculate despite the chaos, her emerald eyes cold and unyielding, her sleek black dress a stark reminder of the stranger she'd become, her posture rigid with a defiance that made Mason's stomach churn, her lack of remorse a knife twisting deeper into his chest with every second she refused to meet his gaze. The neighbors had left after the police and paramedics cleared out, their whispers of support fading into the night, leaving Mason alone with the woman who just shattered his world, his hazel eyes searching her face for a flicker of the Lydia he'd once known. The one who'd kissed him under the Austin sky during their first date at Zilker Park, the one who'd cried tears of joy when Ava and Lily were born. But all he saw now was a traitor, a liar in a dress that screamed infidelity. "How long, Lydia?" Mason finally asked, his voice low and raw, each word a struggle as he fought to keep his composure, his hands trembling at his sides as he stood over the broken remnants of their life, the shattered glass crunching under his boots with every step. Lydia rolled her eyes, a gesture so casual it felt like a slap, her voice dripping with disdain as she replied, "Don't be so dramatic, Mason. You've been suffocating me for years. I needed more. Someone who made me feel alive." The word more hit Mason like a sledgehammer, his chest tightening as memories of their life together flashed through his mind. The late nights fixing air conditioners to pay for her real estate courses, the mornings making pancakes with the girls, the way she'd once looked at him like he was her everything. But now, all of that felt like a lie, a cruel illusion she'd maintained while seeking more behind his back. Driven by a desperate need for the truth, Mason stormed into their bedroom, his boots leaving bloody footprints on the hardwood, and yanked open Lydia's nightstand drawer, his hands shaking as he pulled out a burner phone she'd claimed was broken months ago, its screen lighting up with a single charge to reveal a flood of messages that made his stomach twist, his heart pounding in his ears as he scrolled through texts from Caleb. "Can't wait to see you at the Driscoll tonight, baby. Mason's clueless. Come over after he leaves for work." And the worst, a video of Lydia in their bed, her blonde hair splayed across the pillow Mason slept on, whispering to Caleb, "He has no idea. It's thrilling." The betrayal wasn't just an affair. It was a game, a sick thrill she'd reveled in, and as Mason watched the video, his hands trembling not with rage but with a heartbreak so profound it felt like his soul was being torn apart, he realized Lydia hadn't just cheated, she'd enjoyed destroying him. He marched back to the living room, the phone clutched in his hand, his hazel eyes burning with a mix of anguish and fury as he held it up, his voice breaking as he said, "I saw it all, Lydia. The texts, the video, everything. You didn't even try to hide it." Lydia's emerald eyes flickered for a moment, a brief crack in her armor, but it vanished as quickly as it came, her lips curling into a sneer as she stood, brushing imaginary dust off her dress, her voice icy as she replied, "You weren't supposed to see that, but since you did, let's be clear. You'll never be enough for me, Mason. Caleb gave me what you couldn't." The words were a final blow, each one a nail in the coffin of their marriage, and Mason's knees nearly buckled under the weight of her cruelty. His mind reeling as he thought of Ava and Lily, their innocent faces stained with tears, their world shattered by a mother who cared more for her thrill than her family. "You're pathetic," Lydia added, her voice a venomous hiss as she grabbed her purse from the counter, her heels clicking against the floor as she walked toward the door, her blonde hair swaying with each step, her departure as cold and calculated as her betrayal. Mason stood frozen, the phone still in his hand, the video playing on a loop in his mind. her words echoing like a death knell as the door slammed shut behind her, leaving him alone in the wreckage of the life he'd thought was his. The silence now heavier than ever, a void where love had once lived, replaced by the bitter sting of a truth he could no longer ignore. The morning sun filtered weakly through the curtains of Mason Reed's ranch-style home in Austin's Hyde Park, casting pale shadows across the living room that still bore the scars of the previous night's chaos. Shattered glass swept into a corner, a cracked picture frame leaning against the wall, and the faint outline of Caleb's blood on the hardwood floor, a grim reminder of the betrayal that had shattered Mason's world. At 38, Mason, an HVAC technician with chestnut brown hair now streaked with gray at the temples and hazel eyes dulled by sleeplessness, sat at the kitchen table, a mug of black coffee untouched in front of him, his hands wrapped around it for warmth, though the Texas heat was already creeping in. His torn plaid shirt replaced by a faded gray tee, his knuckles still swollen and scabbed from the fight, his heart heavy with the weight of what he'd lost. Not just his marriage, but the trust of his twin daughters, Ava and Lily, who were still asleep upstairs, their innocence tainted by the memory of their mother's betrayal and a stranger's violence. The house felt hollow, the usual morning sounds of the girls' laughter replaced by an oppressive silence, broken only by the distant hum of a lawnmower and the occasional chirp of a mockingbird outside, a cruel mockery of normalcy in a life that had been torn apart. Mason's mind replayed the events of the barbecue over and over. The slap, Lydia's smirk, the video on her burner phone. Each memory a fresh wound, his chest tight with a mix of rage and heartbreak as he tried to piece together how to move forward, how to explain to his girls that their mother had chosen a thrill over their family. The sound of a key turning in the lock jolted him from his thoughts, his hazel eyes snapping to the door as Lydia Harper walked in, her blonde hair pulled into a sleek ponytail, her emerald eyes hidden behind oversized sunglasses, her black dress swapped for a white blouse and jeans, but her posture as cold and unyielding as ever, her presence an intrusion in a home she'd already abandoned. She dropped her purse on the counter with a casual thud. Her voice clipped as she said, "I hope you've cleaned up the mess from last night. It was everywhere." The audacity of her words hit Mason like a punch, his jaw clenching as he stood slowly, his voice sharp but controlled, a scalpel cutting through the tension. "You're unbelievable, Lydia. You brought that man into our home, let him humiliate me in front of our kids, and now you're acting like I'm the inconvenience." Lydia removed her sunglasses, her emerald eyes narrowing with a disdain that made Mason's blood boil, her arms crossing as she replied, "Don't start, Mason. I'm exhausted. You've been dragging this family down for years, your boring job, your predictable little barbecues. I needed more, someone who made me feel alive, not trapped." Her words echoed the cruelty of the night before, each one a dagger to Mason's heart, his hazel eyes flashing with a mix of pain and fury as he stepped closer, his voice low but trembling with emotion. "Alive? You let Caleb slap me in front of Ava and Lily, Lydia. You stood there and smirked while he called himself their new father. What about them? Did you even think about what this would do to our girls while you were sneaking around, playing your little games in hotel rooms?" Lydia flinched, a subtle twitch of her jaw, the first real reaction Mason had seen since this nightmare began. But she quickly recovered, her gaze averting as she muttered, "You weren't supposed to find out like that." The admission was a gut punch, confirmation of her calculated betrayal, and Mason pressed on, his voice rising with a raw intensity. "I saw everything, Lydia. The texts, the video in our bed. You didn't just cheat, you enjoyed it. You wanted me to be the fool, didn't you?" Lydia's emerald eyes met his, cold and unapologetic, her voice icy as she snapped, "Caleb made me feel wanted, Mason. You made me feel like a piece of furniture, something you'd gotten used to but didn't care about anymore. And the girls? They'll adjust. Kids are resilient. They'll see what a real man looks like with Caleb." The mention of Caleb as a real man after what he'd done, slapping Mason in front of his daughters, claiming their home, snapped something inside Mason, his hands shaking as he stepped closer, close enough to smell her perfume. A scent that once brought comfort but now made him sick, his voice a low growl as he said, "A real man? A coward who assaults another man in front of children? A man who's now in a hospital bed because he couldn't handle the consequences?" I gave you everything, Lydia. My vows, my best years, our daughters. And you repaid me with betrayal. Lydia scoffed, her lips curling into a sneer. Spare me the sob story, Mason. You blew this up. You attacked Caleb, you're the violent one here. The accusation was a final straw, Mason's hazel eyes darkening with a resolve he hadn't felt before. His voice steady as he replied, No, Lydia, you blew this up. You ruined us. And now you're going to try to take my girls from me, aren't you? Just like you planned with Caleb, going public, introducing him as their new dad. Lydia's sneer faltered for a moment, her emerald eyes flickering with something. Guilt, perhaps, or fear, but she quickly masked it, turning her back to him as she headed for the stairs, her voice casual but laced with venom. I'll file for full custody by the end of the week. The girls deserve better than a father who can't control himself. Mason watched her go, his heart pounding with a mix of rage and heartbreak. His hands clenched into fists as he whispered to the empty room. This isn't over, Lydia. Not by a long shot. The silence that followed was heavier than ever. A storm brewing in the wreckage of a home that had once been filled with love. Now a battleground for a war Mason hadn't chosen but was ready to fight. 3 days had passed since the catastrophic barbecue in Mason Reed's Austin home, but the echoes of that night still reverberated through the ranch-style house in Hyde Park, where the air was thick with unspoken grief, the living room now partially cleaned but still bearing the scars of the violence. Faint bloodstains scrubbed into the hardwood, a patched-up bookshelf leaning precariously against the wall, and the absence of the family photo from their Hawaii honeymoon, which Mason had thrown into the trash, unable to bear the sight of Lydia's smiling face next to his. A lie preserved in glass and frame. At 38, Mason, an HVAC technician with chestnut brown hair streaked with gray and hazel eyes now hardened with resolve, sat at the dining table, a thick manila folder in front of him. Its contents a lifeline he'd spent the last 72 hours preparing. Divorce papers, custody arrangements, and a detailed timeline of Lydia's betrayal. His hands steady despite the storm raging inside him, his faded gray tee clinging to his frame, his knuckles still scabbed but healing, a physical reminder of the fight that had marked the end of his marriage. The house was quiet, the twins, Ava and Lily, at a neighbor's for the morning, their laughter replaced by the distant hum of traffic on 45th Street and the occasional bark of a dog. A stillness that allowed Mason to focus, to channel his heartbreak into action. His mind replaying the video on Lydia's burner phone, her whispers to Caleb. He has no idea. It's thrilling. Each word a fuel for the fire that now burned in his chest. A fire not of rage but of determination to protect his girls. To reclaim the life Lydia had tried to destroy. The front door creaked open and Lydia Harper stepped in, her blonde hair loose and flowing, her emerald eyes sharp with a calculated indifference. Her white blouse and jeans replaced by a silk emerald dress that shimmered in the morning light. A cruel irony given the color of her eyes, her heels clicking against the hardwood as she walked into the dining room. Her presence a storm cloud in the fragile calm Mason had built, her purse slung over her shoulder as she surveyed the room with a disdainful glance, her voice dripping with mockery as she said, "What's this, Mason? Another one of your guilt trips? I told you I'm done with those." Mason didn't flinch, his hazel eyes locking onto hers with a steely resolve. His voice flat but firm as he slid the folder across the table, the sound of paper against what a quiet declaration of war. "Sit down, Lydia. I'm done. You made your choice, and now I'm making mine." Lydia hesitated, her emerald eyes narrowing with suspicion. But curiosity got the better of her, and she sat, her movements deliberate as she flipped open the folder, her fingers pausing over the divorce papers, her lips curling into a sneer as she scoffed. "You're serious? You're breaking up our family over a mistake." The word mistake ignited a fury in Mason, his hands clenching into fists under the table, his voice rising with a raw intensity as he leaned forward, his hazel eyes blazing. "A mistake? A mistake is forgetting our anniversary. Lydia, you planned this. You brought Caleb into our home. Let him slap me in front of Ava and Lily. Let him claim he was their new father while you stood there smirking. That wasn't a mistake. That was betrayal, calculated and cruel." Lydia leaned back in her chair, her arms crossing, her emerald eyes cold and unyielding, her voice a venomous hiss as she replied, "You're blowing this out of proportion, Mason. You attacked Caleb, you're the one who turned this into a circus. I needed something more and he gave it to me. You can't handle that." Mason's jaw tightened, his mind flashing to the video, to the texts, to the way Lydia had laughed with Caleb while his world crumbled. And he pressed on, his voice steady but laced with pain. "I have everything, Lydia. The doorbell cam footage of Caleb's slap, the screenshots of your texts, the video of you in our bed with him, laughing about how clueless I was. I have witnesses, neighbors who saw what happened, who heard what he said. And most importantly, I'm the one who's been here. I'm the one who's tucked Ava and Lily into bed, helped with their homework, wiped their tears while you were off with Caleb, coming home late smelling of his cologne." Lydia's sneer faltered, her emerald eyes flickering with a flash of unease, the first crack in her armor since this nightmare began. But she quickly masked it, her voice sharp as she snapped, "You think you're some kind of hero now? You'll never win this, Mason. I'll take the girls. I'll ruin you in court. You'll be begging me to come back when you're alone, drowning in your own misery." The threat sent a chill down Mason's spine, his heart pounding with a mix of fear and defiance. But he refused to let her see it, his hazel eyes unwavering as he replied, his voice quiet but resolute, "No, Lydia, I won't be begging. I'll be rebuilding. For me, for Ava, for Lily. You lost the right to call the shots the day you let Caleb put his hands on me in front of our daughters." Lydia stood abruptly, her chair scraping against the floor, her emerald dress catching the light as she grabbed her purse, her voice a low growl as she spat, "You'll regret this, Mason. You have no idea what I'm capable of." She stormed toward the door, her heels echoing with each step, but Mason called after her, his voice steady, "I've already seen what you're capable of, Lydia, and I'm ready for whatever comes next." The door slammed shut behind her, the sound reverberating through the house like a gunshot, leaving Mason alone with the folder, his hands trembling not with fear but with a newfound strength, a father ready to fight for his daughters, a man ready to reclaim his life from the ashes of betrayal. The silence now a battle cry for the war he knew was just beginning. A week had passed since Mason Reed slid the divorce papers across the dining table in his Austin home, and the ranch-style house in Hyde Park felt like a battlefield slowly being reclaimed. The air still heavy with the ghosts of betrayal but now tinged with a quiet determination. The living room finally cleared of debris, shattered glass swept away, the bookshelf removed entirely, and the hardwood floor scrubbed clean of Caleb's blood, though the faint scent of bleach lingered as a reminder of the violence that had marked the end of a decade-long marriage. Mason, a 38-year-old HVAC technician with chestnut brown hair streaked with gray and hazel eyes now burning with a protective resolve, stood in the hallway, a screwdriver in hand as he installed a new deadbolt on the front door, his faded gray tee stained with sweat, his movements methodical, each turn of the screw a symbolic act of locking Lydia Harper out of the life she tried to destroy, a life he was now determined to rebuild for himself and his twin daughters, Ava and Lily, who were playing quietly in their room upstairs, their laughter a fragile melody that Mason clung to like a lifeline. The house felt different, the walls freshly painted a soft cream to erase the memories of Lydia's presence. Her leaning against the hallway texting Caleb, her laughter echoing with him during the barbecue. And the bedroom transformed, the mattress flipped, the sheets burned in a backyard bonfire 2 nights ago, the flames consuming the last traces of her infidelity as Mason watched, his hazel eyes reflecting the fire, not with anger but with a cleansing resolve, a promise to himself that no remnant of her betrayal would taint the sanctuary he was building for his girls. Lydia had left the day after their confrontation, her departure as cold as her betrayal, her emerald dress shimmering in the sunlight as she walked out without a word to Ava or Lily, her heels clicking against the pavement, her blonde hair swaying with each step, her only communication a text later that evening. "Tell the girls I'll call when I'm ready." The message had made Mason's blood boil, his hands trembling as he read it. The cowardice of her words a final slap in the face, but he'd forced himself to stay calm, to focus on his daughters, who deserved more than a mother who couldn't even say goodbye. That evening, Mason sat on the edge of Ava and Lily's twin beds, The room bathed in the soft glow of a unicorn nightlight, the girls' faces pale and uncertain as they clutched their stuffed animals. Their eyes, hazel like his, searching his for answers. Their voices small as Ava whispered, "Is Mommy coming back, Daddy?" And Lily added, "Did we do something wrong?" The questions broke Mason's heart, his throat tightening as he pulled them into a hug, his voice gentle but firm as he said, "Mommy and I won't be living together anymore, sweethearts. It's not because of you, you didn't do anything wrong. Daddy loves you, and I'm here always." Lily clung to him, her tiny arms wrapping around his neck, her tears soaking into his shirt as she whispered, "Don't leave us too, Daddy?" And Mason's heart shattered, his hazel eyes welling with tears as he promised, "Never, baby girl. I'll never leave you." The days that followed were a slow, painful adjustment, the girls asking less about Lydia with each passing day, their questions fading as she missed call after call, her excuses piling up, "I'm busy, bad reception, I'll make it up to them." Promises she never kept, her absence a wound that Mason worked tirelessly to heal, filling their days with small joys, like pancake breakfasts with extra chocolate chips, trips to Barton Springs to splash in the cool water, and movie nights with popcorn. Each moment a brick in the foundation of a new life. Mason started seeing a therapist, a woman named Dr. Elena Torres, a former social worker with a warm voice and a no-nonsense approach. Her office a small, cozy space downtown with sage green walls and a bookshelf lined with psychology texts. Her words cutting through Mason's self-doubt like a knife during their first session. "Lydia didn't betray you because you failed, Mason. She betrayed you because she's broken. People like her thrive on chaos, and you were just the casualty." The truth hit Mason hard, his hazel eyes staring at the floor as he absorbed her words, the realization that he'd spent years blaming himself. Maybe if he'd been more exciting, more successful, more attentive. Melting away under the weight of Dr. Torres's clarity. A clarity that gave him permission to stop carrying Lydia's guilt, to focus on healing for himself and his girls. One evening, as the Texas sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink, Mason sat on the back porch with Ava and Lily, the girls giggling as they blew bubbles, the iridescent spheres floating across the yard, their laughter a balm to Mason's wounded soul, a reminder that even in the wreckage of betrayal, there was still beauty, still hope, still a family worth fighting for. And as he watched them, his hazel eyes softened, a quiet strength settling into his bones, a father ready to face whatever came next, knowing he was enough for the two little girls who needed him most. A month had passed since Lydia Harper walked out of Mason Reed's life, leaving behind a trail of betrayal that had reshaped their ranch-style home in Austin's Hyde Park into a sanctuary for Mason and his twin daughters, Ava and Lily. The air now lighter with the scent of fresh paint and the sound of the girls' laughter, a stark contrast to the chaos that had defined their summer. Mason, a 38-year-old HVAC technician with chestnut brown hair streaked with gray and hazel eyes now carrying a quiet strength, was in the kitchen on a crisp October morning, flipping blueberry pancakes for the girls, his faded gray tee dusted with flour, his movement steady as he hummed a tune from their favorite Disney movie. The normalcy of the moment a hard-won victory after weeks of rebuilding, the house transformed, new locks on the doors, walls painted a soft cream, and the bedroom, cleansed of Lydia's presence, a space now filled with the girls' drawings taped to the fridge, their colorful scribbles a testament to the family Mason was fighting to protect. Ava and Lily sat at the table, their hazel eyes bright with excitement as they chattered about their school's fall festival, their voices a melody that warmed Mason's heart, a reminder of why he'd fought so hard to keep them safe, their innocence slowly returning after the trauma of the barbecue, though Mason knew the scars of that night. The slap, Caleb's blood, their mother's betrayal, still lingered in their quiet moments, in the way Lily sometimes clung to him at bedtime, whispering, "You won't leave, right, Daddy?" The doorbell rang, a sharp chime that cut through the morning's warmth, and Mason's stomach dropped, his hazel eyes narrowing as he set down the spatula, a sense of dread creeping in as he walked to the door, his boots thudding against the hardwood floor, the memory of Caleb's arrival months ago flashing through his mind, a wound that still stung despite the healing he'd done. He opened the door, and there stood Lydia, Her blonde hair styled in soft waves, her emerald eyes glossy with a calculated vulnerability, her white coat draped over a navy dress. The same dress she'd worn the night Mason proposed under the stars at Mount Bonnell 8 years ago. A choice that felt like a deliberate jab, her presence a storm threatening to unravel the peace Mason had built. Her voice soft but rehearsed as she said, "Mason, can we talk? Please, just a few minutes." The girls peeked around the corner, their pancake-smeared faces lighting up as Lily whispered, "Mommy!" And Ava waved shyly, but Mason's heart hardened, his hazel eyes cold as he held the door halfway open, his voice low and firm. "What do you want, Lydia?" He told the girls to finish their breakfast, his tone gentle but unyielding, and stepped outside, pulling the door shut behind him, the morning air crisp against his skin as he faced the woman who'd nearly destroyed him, her perfume. A scent he once loved, now a bitter reminder of her infidelity. Lydia folded her arms, her emerald eyes shimmering with crocodile tears, her voice cracking just enough to seem genuine as she said, "I messed up, Mason. I know I did. I thought Caleb was what I wanted. He made me feel alive, and I confused that with love. But he's gone now, and I've had time to think. You're a good man, a great father. I want to come back. For the girls, at least." The words were a punch to Mason's gut, his jaw clenching as he stared at her, the audacity of her request igniting a fury he'd thought he'd buried, his hazel eyes flashing with a mix of disbelief and resolve as he replied, his voice cold. "You think this is a game, Lydia? You cheat, humiliate me in front of our kids, nearly tear this family apart. And now, because Caleb left you, you think you can just waltz back in and pick up where you left off." Lydia's face hardened, her emerald eyes narrowing, but she pressed on, her voice trembling with a practiced vulnerability. "I don't expect forgiveness, Mason. I just want a second chance. For Ava and Lily. They need their mother." Mason stepped closer, his voice a low growl, his hazel eyes burning with a protective fury. "For them? You left them, Lydia. You missed every call, skipped every visit. Lily asked me last week if you were dead because that made more sense to her than a mother who just disappears. I have everything, the texts, the video, the hospital report from Caleb's injuries. You lost the right to call yourself their mother the day you let him slap me in front of them. The day you smirked while he claimed to be their new father." Lydia's tears welled, but Mason saw through them, his heart unmoved, his voice steady as he continued. "You don't get to come back because your plan fell apart. You don't get to use our girls as a safety net." Lydia's mask slipped, her emerald eyes flashing with desperation as she whispered, "I'll fight for custody, Mason. You know I will." The threat sent a chill down Mason's spine, but he stood his ground, his hazel eyes unwavering as he replied, "Then fight. But you'll need more than fake tears and a pretty dress. I've got the evidence, the witnesses, the truth. And I've got the girls' trust. Something you threw away." Lydia opened her mouth to respond, but nothing came out, her emerald eyes darting away as she realized she'd lost him, her power over him gone, and Mason stepped closer, his voice a quiet storm. "You never loved me, Lydia. You loved the idea of me, the man who paid the bills, kept the house, made you look good. But real love doesn't betray, doesn't humiliate, doesn't abandon. Get a lawyer if you want to talk. But until then, stay away from my kids." He turned, opened the door, and walked back inside, locking it behind him. The click of the deadbolt a final barrier between him and the woman who'd once been his world, his hazel eyes softening as he knelt beside Lily, who looked up at him, her voice small. "Is Mommy coming in?" Mason placed a hand on her shoulder, his voice gentle. "No, sweetheart. Mommy has to figure some things out. But I'm here, and I'm not going anywhere." Ava hugged him, her tiny arms wrapping around his neck, and for the first time in months, Mason felt a peace that wasn't fragile, a strength that wasn't forced, a father who'd finally closed the door on the past, ready to face the future with his girls by his side. 3 months had passed since Mason Reed locked Lydia Harper out of his life, and the ranch-style home in Austin's Hyde Park had transformed into a haven of healing, the crisp January air carrying the scent of cedar through the open windows. The living room now a cozy sanctuary with a new rug in shades of blue and gray, a small Christmas tree still standing in the corner, its lights twinkling softly, a symbol of the new traditions Mason had created with his twin daughters, Ava and Lily, who were now thriving in the stability he'd fought so hard to provide. At 38, Mason, an HVAC technician with chestnut brown hair streaked with gray and hazel eyes now glowing with a quiet peace, stood on the back porch, a mug of hot cocoa in his hands, his faded gray tee swapped for a flannel shirt, the Texas winter chill brushing against his skin as he watched Ava and Lily chase each other through the yard, their laughter echoing as they tossed a bright red frisbee, their hazel eyes, mirrors of his own, sparkling with joy, a joy that had been hard-won after the chaos of the summer, the scars of Lydia's betrayal and Caleb's violence fading with each passing day, replaced by the warmth of a family rebuilt on trust and love. The custody battle had been a grueling ordeal, but Mason had won primary custody with ease, Lydia's threats crumbling in court when faced with the evidence. Doorbell cam footage of Caleb's slap, the burner phone texts and video, neighbors' testimonies of the barbecue chaos, her absence from Ava and Lily's lives in the months that followed only sealing her fate, the judge's ruling a validation of Mason's role as the steady parent, a father who'd never wavered, even when his world had collapsed. Around him, Lydia had visitation rights, but she rarely showed up, her excuses piling up like leaves in the fall, her absence a bitter relief for Mason, who no longer felt the sting of her betrayal, only a quiet gratitude that his girls were free from her chaos. Their lives now filled with routine, school mornings with oatmeal and orange juice, Saturday trips to the Thinkery Museum to build contraptions out of cardboard, and Sunday dinners of homemade pizza, each moment a thread in the tapestry of a new life Mason had woven for them. Therapy with Dr. Elena Torres had been a lifeline, her cozy downtown office a safe space where Mason had unraveled the guilt and shame he'd carried for months. Her words a balm to his wounded soul during their latest session. "You didn't fail, Mason. You loved with everything you had. And that's why it hurt so much. But love isn't about erasing yourself. It's about knowing your worth. And you've shown Ava and Lily what that looks like." The realization had settled deep in Mason's bones, his hazel eyes meeting hers with a clarity he hadn't felt in years, the weight of self-blame lifting as he understood that Lydia's brokenness wasn't his burden to carry, that his loyalty had been a gift, not a flaw, a lesson he now carried with him as he rebuilt his life, a lesson he wanted to share with others who'd faced the same betrayal. Don't apologize for loving the wrong person, but for staying too long, for letting their chaos define you when you were always enough. That evening, as the Texas sky turned a deep indigo, Mason sat on the porch swing with his friend Jake, a fellow HVAC tech who'd been a rock through the ordeal, the two sipping beers as they watched Ava and Lily chase fireflies, their giggles filling the air, the glow of the insects mirroring the light in Mason's heart, a peace he'd never thought possible after the storm of the summer. Jake clapped him on the shoulder, his voice warm. "You did good, man. Those girls, they're happy. You're a hell of a dad." Mason smiled, his hazel eyes softening as he watched his daughters, his voice steady. "Thanks, Jake. I'm getting there. It's not perfect, but it's ours." The words were a quiet declaration of his rebirth, a man who'd walked through fire and emerged stronger, a father who'd learned that love wasn't about holding on to someone who hurt you, but about building a life for those who stayed, who needed you most. Meanwhile, Lydia's life had unraveled in the background, whispers from mutual friends painting a picture of a woman spiraling. Caleb had left her for good. Her real estate career tanked after clients heard of her drama, and she'd moved to Dallas, chasing a new thrill that never came. Her story no longer Mason's to carry, her chaos a distant echo in the life he'd rebuilt. As the fireflies danced in the yard, Mason pulled Ava and Lily into a hug, their tiny arms wrapping around him, their laughter a song of resilience, a testament to the family they'd become, a family that had found freedom in the quiet moments, in the love that had survived betrayal, in the strength of a father who'd learned to let go of the past and embrace the future, his hazel eyes reflecting the stars above, a man at peace with the journey that had made him whole again.